Welcome back to the Joshua Thompson Podcast Hour, as I am with every week and every episode, always joined by dynamic, dynamite folks. Today is no exception. Let the jacket and the hair be a preview to everything. It's bright. She got it all right. I've got Dr. Hardin with us here. Welcome so much. Thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited to get into the story about who you are, what makes you tick, and why you do what you do. We were talking before the show that since you've been in Indianapolis, you have these credentials and you're like, I never really used them. But here in Indy, we will run a title, a credential in a heartbeat. What's the doctorate in? How'd you get it? And what's the calling and what's the use for it? How do you put the DR into what you do every day?
Well, it's a very loaded answer,
Yeah,
but
that's why I asked the question.
I really want to start with the fact that it's in education.
Awesome. Yeah.
My background is in education, philanthropy, and community building. And so because of my life's work, I was deemed a doctor a couple of times. And my work and my passion is around children and investing in the next generation.
That's awesome.
So I'm deeply passionate about it. I've got some credentials, I got some things to back it up, but really it boils down to really making sure that the next generation has what they need, that they are not just focused on the right now, but also on the future. Mm-hmm. I'm really passionate about closing the racial wealth gap. It's really important to me that children have an opportunity to thrive in every sense of the word. And so I have probably spent the last 20 to 30 years of my life working on that. And it's something that I'm humbled by and also deeply proud of.
Yeah. Typically, when I interview and hear folks, and I think you would say the same too, folks who are in education or folks who are mentoring and teaching younger folks for a better future for them, usually the impetus is because of something from their own background to change. So let's dive into that. What is it in your experience, your lived experience, little Dr. Hardin, that you're like, okay, and now this is what I didn't have and I'm going to make better, or what I did have that I want to replicate for other folks? Where did this start from for you?
You know, I'm laughing and smiling because I was just having this conversation with my daughter. I'm a single mother.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I was telling her that, ironically, I was thinking that a lot of what I'm finally doing now is what I thought about when I was a child, right? I remember being a child raised by a single mother and saying, I wish the government would just pay parents to stay home with their children, right? And that was a thought that I had. I also remember being in Detroit and being stopped by a 80-year-old woman, I think it was, and she told me at 5, like, you really care about people, and she started to talk to me about my future and things like that. And then finally, I'm now getting into real estate development, and I remember when I was a little girl, I would drive by buildings, and I would be like, that needs to go there, right? And then I would also, and I mean, it was a continuous theme. Yeah. And so when I look at young people and the work that I do, I think that it is like really a deception that you have to tell children what they have to be, and you have to put the trajectory of their lives for them. And I think children innately have a gift and they innately know what they want to do. And I told my daughter why we were having this conversation is like, don't let people talk you out of who you are. Mm-hmm. You know who you are, right?
Yeah.
So stick with that. And so that is really, I think, one of the reasons that I am so passionate. I sometimes share the story about my mother being in Motown. She wrote, actually, Baby, Baby, Where Did Our Love Go? When she was in the 8th grade. And so we grew up hearing all about this particular part of my mother's life and how when they sent her the contract, she didn't know what it was. And she was from a real small city named Dowagiac, Michigan. She never sent it back in, and they changed one word.
And so
she never got paid. We never got paid. And so I think that to your question about what has really colored my life and given me the lens that I have is really around the fact that, you know, a child's life can be different by just cultivating their gift and pouring into their gift, right? And someone else profited off of that. Right. And it's still profiting till this day, while my mother, God rest her soul, is gone. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that children are the key to breaking generational poverty. I think that if one generation doesn't get it, the next generation can if they're given the tools. And I feel like more energy should be spent cultivating those gifts in those children. So that's how I came to where I am.
My question, and I'm very curious, because you sit at the intersection of education, community development, and entrepreneurship, to be honest. We know what education is for kids in K through 12. It is very scripted. It can be very restrictive. So how do you instill in them that, yeah, this is what you got to do to make it through, but then how do you cultivate that je ne sais quoi, the things that the kids know that they know? How do you do that and kind of show them how to navigate through it while still having them to conscribe to what standard education is, but kind of balancing the scale so that curiosity and discovery doesn't take a back seat. It's tandem with required learning. If that's, I know it's a very myopic question, but
it is, but it's a great question. And I think to your point about, the intersection of my background, I also now have added real estate. And I think that's important because I say that because many people don't know, and I found this out from my work in the community, that there are 600 children in Lawrence Township alone that are homeless. And so I think you do children a disservice when you only focus on education. And in our work with parents and our work with children, and when I've interviewed parents about our product, because I have more than one business, but Live Your Song specifically really focuses on helping children defeat voice snatchers in their lives. And
voice snatchers.
I like
that.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. We teach children how to defeat voice snatchers in their lives. And when you say that about how do you blend all of that, it's like parents want their children prepared for the future. So education cannot just begin in a school setting. It has to begin before school. It has to continue, after. And so I think one of the ways that I do that is by, first of all, we teach them our formula, which is all about, hey, you have a voice. You determine what that voice is. You determine where that voice goes. No one else can determine what a voice snatcher is for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important in a world that politicizes everything, that stigmatizes and labels children. It's ironic when you do work with children, they don't call racism a voice snatcher. And I think that's important to understand that children have their own traumas, their own things that they're battling through. And the best thing that we can teach children is how to be self-advocates and how to stand up for what they believe in and live in their own convictions.
Yeah.
So I don't know that answers your question, but I think that's the biggest thing is go through the education system without taking that on and feeling like that's your story. And I'll just lastly say this because it is important. It happened to me in the 5th grade. I tell this story all the time. I was the only Black girl in a 5th grade class in Texas when the Black History curriculum came out. And my teacher, bless her heart, said, "Lonna, do you want to read?" And I began to read from that history book about slavery and my ancestors and seeing them in chains and all of those things. And I ran out of the class and tears began to come down my face. And she said, "Well, why? Why, are you crying, And I said, because why is the only thing that you read about Black people is that they're slaves?
Yeah.
But I share the story because even in the 5th grade, I had the consciousness to know something was wrong with that story. And it wasn't until years later when I was probably about 26 that I was driving from Michigan to Indianapolis and then back. And I had the epiphany about all the great people in the world and how they all had written stories.
Yeah.
Because at that time, Barack Obama had just come out in his book and all of that. And so the thought came to me, the only way to write R-I-G-H-T history is to write history.
Yeah.
And so really, fundamentally, we can let kids, explore who they are in education. We can let kids explore what they want to be. But ultimately, we have to empower them to write their own stories.
And get away from the voice snatchers. Girl, I'm using that. I absolutely love it.
It's a book, so you can tell them to buy the book. But yeah, absolutely.
This is amazing. Like I said, you have a wonderful story to tell in yourself, and that story has motivated you. You said parents want to prepare their kids for the future. What better way to do it than to have that continuous dialogue with kids about what they envision their future to look like? and make sure that you can make the pathway a little bit easier for them to do that. Thank you so much for joining us here today. This was awesome. Thank you.
I absolutely appreciate you for having me, and I look forward to continuing the conversation as well.